Hello, and welcome to the Johnson Controls Blue Water webinar for May 2023. I am Craig Hanna, and I am grateful to serve as the engineering manager of the Johnson Controls Water Infrastructure Technology team. Our team of subject matter experts is dedicated to designing, installing, and commissioning projects that reduce water loss, that increase water utility staff efficiency, and that decrease your operational and maintenance expenses. Our team exists solely to provide your water utility with the tools that it needs to run smoothly. And we are thankful that you could join us today for a very special webinar event. Our goals for today's webinar are to explain what exactly is a smart city and how your community and your utility will benefit from becoming one, and most importantly, to answer your questions about smart cities and Internet of Things devices and applications. We have gathered a team of subject matter experts to participate on our panel, including members of our own water team, Johnson Controls local government leaders, and the leadership team from Senet. I would like to start by introducing you to two of my teammates on the Johnson Controls water team, Audrey Noel and Jonathan Gunn. Audrey, would you please tell us more about yourself and how you help water utilities?
Sure, thank you, Craig. I'm Audrey Noel, Director of the Water Infrastructure Technology team here at Johnson Controls. I have 7 years of industry experience, a Juris Doctorate with an emphasis in environmental law, and decades of experience in operations. I have the privilege of leading the team from the sunny seaside in Huntington Beach, California, but I couldn't do it without our very knowledgeable and talented market manager, Jonathan Gunn, who offices on the other side of this great nation in Canandaigua, New York. Jonathan, would you please tell us a little bit about your experience, please?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Audrey. Again, Jonathan Gunn. I'm a market manager with the team here, and I have 13, almost 14 years now with experience in the industry here. And like Craig, I'm heavily involved within the American Water Works Association. I'm currently the chair of the Customer Metering Practices Committee, chair of the C712 single jet meter standard, and co-author a number of different manuals and publications. So as always, we thank you for being here with us this morning. And I also want to introduce another special guest of ours, Philip Lowry. Philip, I could say a lot about your abilities and skills in this space, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Would you mind just introducing yourself?
No, Jonathan, you're way too kind. I have the privilege of leading a group of dedicated engineers and business development professionals in the pursuit of being the industry leader in water conservation, wastewater treatment, as well as the production of bioenergy. Throughout North America, my responsibility is market development, managing sales and operations resources, and defining the Johnson Controls vision for creating sustainable, resilient solutions for our public and private sector clients. And I've been working with local governments, as you know, Jonathan, for the better part of the last quarter of a century. So with that, thank you so much for having me on this call today. Audrey, would you please introduce our friends from Senet?
Actually, I think I saw Lisa just join here as well. So
oh,
Lisa,
you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. Sorry, I just flew in to Houston. I raced up to my room, and I don't know why it looks like zombie colors here, but I'm alive and well, and I'm excited to be here. I'm the Director of Government for Johnson Controls, and similar to Philip, I've been in the role, I think, since Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble were probably our colleagues, or at least someone was walking around probably with the 10 Commandments, 20 years, and look forward to being on this with this fantastic team that I had the privilege of working with for many years, and hearing all the thought leadership from our team as well as Senet. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us, Lisa. Sure do appreciate it, and glad you made it. I want to now introduce some of our friends from Senet and to thank them for participating in today's webinar. Mark Owen is responsible for customer-facing sales and business development initiatives at Senet, targeting utilities, enterprises, solution providers, systems integrators, radio access network providers, and communication service providers. Mark brings more than 20 years of leadership experience managing and scaling global teams and relationships across mobile, wireless, and Internet of Things, IoT. Mark joined Senet from Actility, where he held the position of Area Vice President Americas, responsible for establishing and managing customer and partner relationships for the company's low power wide area network, LP1, IoT platform. Prior to Actility, Mark held senior executive roles at business-to-business software and services companies, including Zoob, Motricity, OpenWave, and Oracle, supporting enterprise and communication service provider customers. Mark has a degree in quantitative business analysis from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. And Tom Wayman brings close to 30 years of wireless technology experience to Senet. Prior to Senet, Tom enjoyed a history of driving growth and incremental market share in Fortune 500 companies with Nextel, Sprint, and AT&T. Tom took his wireless carrier knowledge to the largest wireless infrastructure provider, American Tower, where he was very successful in securing long-term wireless infrastructure agreements with large public venues, convention centers, arenas, racetracks, casinos, malls, and hotels to design, deploy, and maintain neutral host distributed antenna systems. Tom is a graduate of Providence College. Prior to jumping into wireless technology, Tom was a CH-47 pilot in the U.S. Army, a small business owner, actor, and real estate professional specializing in Section 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. Mark and Tim, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Hello, this is Mark Ewan. Thanks for having us. And just a quick background on Senet. We've been in the LoRaWAN space from the very beginning. We're one of the founders of the LoRa Alliance. We're based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is just about an hour drive from Boston Logan Airport up the coast. Beautiful little town right on the coast there. I'm actually based in Palo Alto, California, and I have been in the LoRaWAN industry since the very early days. The LoRa Alliance was founded in 2015, and I got involved in 2016. Tom?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Audrey. I like the way you said before, jumping into the wireless industry. I was a CH-47 pilot, and I was actually paid to stay in and not jump out, which was kind of exciting. A lot of people jumped out of my helicopter. So thanks for having us. Look forward to the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. And Craig, would you please provide us with an overview of today's webinar?
You're on mute, Craig.
Sorry about that. We'll first ask Lisa to share with us some 4 common misconceptions about smart cities that came from a survey that she conducted, as well as some other information about smart cities and how communities will benefit from them. And following that, Lisa and our friends at Senet will cover the 5 terms that everyone really needs to know about smart cities and Internet of Things devices and applications. Our friends from Senet will then provide a quick overview of the different communications networks that are available for smart cities, their relative strengths and weaknesses, and we'll provide some example use cases for each type of network. And once we've covered the key terms and the communication technologies, we'll present several use cases of what is available today, how these technologies will benefit your community and your utility, and then we'll discuss some technologies that are in development, and we'll finish our webinar by taking your questions about smart cities and Internet of Things or IoT devices and applications. So Lisa, would you please start us off?
Absolutely, and thanks, Craig. So just a quick kind of status on where we are. And I actually just left a meeting with about 30 mayors in Washington, D.C. last evening. And they really, the mayors, city managers, that local government, if you talk about federal and state and local, the local government folks really think that they're where the rubber hits the road and work gets done. But they're still working, depending on who you speak to and where we all live, in a state of recovery. There's some parts of the country that believe that they're out of recovery and are working on thriving and rebuilding. And then there's other places where they're still trying to determine how to recover, how the whole concept of the pandemic changed work-life serving balance, where you work and where you live, and the hybrid scenarios that are out there, and how that really affects our building assets, the infrastructure that's in cities and counties and regions, how the space is being reimagined because perhaps they are not coming back in the same way, and how that's affecting the local economy. And so looking at any investment that they need to make, regardless of it's from tax-paying dollars or from the federal funds that are pouring out, they're trying to understand at the end of the day what is going to attract and retain more citizens and constituents and businesses so they can have an economic vibrant area in their downtowns as well as their neighborhoods. So that is what is the current state. Again, it's very patchy depending on where you are in the country, but I would say that the majority of city and county leaders are really looking for what they need to do and what those investments are in order to get them to their next space. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, we can talk a little bit about. So these are some of the challenges. We have the luxury of speaking with leaders all over the country and quite frankly in the world, and that whole citizen and constituent confidence, that was a big piece during the pandemic. They wanted their elderly to get back into the libraries. They wanted their families to start using those parks and recreation areas. They wanted folks to do their civic responsibility and get back into those courthouses. But that was the challenge. Healthy buildings, which is a place where Johnson Controls has been thriving and working in for many, many decades, really became more important than ever before. And how to communicate the fact that places were safe and they were healthy and that their leaders were actually investing in technologies and other initiatives that would help them be more resilient. So that was that whole confidence. So we're taking from confidence in terms of almost rebranding their cities and their counties. And I've had a couple of mayors say, wow, I'm putting the dark hat on now, and now I'm a marketing expert because I know people have choices. So that's still something that's a forefront. Economic landscape, as we all know, when we open up the newspaper or we turn on our Yahoo News, when we open up our phone, there's still challenges with inflation. There's challenges with workforce development if we're going to have the right folks in the future, and that bench for the jobs that we are developing and the technologies and everything that might actually shift jobs that are currently in place. And as we said before, competing with citizens and constituents. I was on the plane the other day when I was talking to someone who lived in San Antonio and they worked in Paris. So it's those long haul commuters, they're starting to call them, that are able to live wherever. And it really depends on how much these different city leaders are investing into their communities so that people want to stay. So it's basically a big competition on these days. I think something we learned, and we're continuing to learn through the pandemic, was the whole communications or lack thereof. And government, as they were never truly the first adopters in most of the technology, really saw a blinding gap on how to be able to speak to their constituents, as far as even how to continue permitting, how to act, what services are continuing or not continuing, how they're changing, what is the information on where the infrastructure is safe and healthy to go in. So, and now it's how do we use technology in order to communicate so much more than we used to have to do, walking handhelds and going face to face and doing it manually. And we talked about recovery mode. I think the next piece about that, public safety needs, unfortunately, again, when you can't turn on the news without seeing another horrific event that is happening in cities. And I was just on the phone with the mayor of Louisville, I think 2 days before the tragedy there too. So you never know what that next public safety need is. And quite frankly, mayors and city managers and county commissioners are concerned because they want their cities to be destination cities. They want people to come and spend their dollars there and invest and raise their families there. But if they don't think that's a safe place to go, they have a lot of other options. And then we talked a little bit about the hybrid working, living, and serving, and how technology will, and all levels of technology will achieve those goals. And so I think we have just one more general slide. If you can go to the next one, in terms of what drives what we consider smart cities, or at Johnson Controls, we call it secure, connected, and sustainable and resilient spaces. So adaptive environments, we talked about how things are changing and morphing. Sustainability, and however you're going to define that, and that's basically emissions and consumption and all the goals, then the mandates and commitments that city and global leaders are putting in place. Resiliency, and that's a fun one, and we can get into that a little bit later, the difference between sustainability and resiliency, because they were so interchangeable for so long that we actually went out and spent, I think about 280 leaders, we went and said, define what sustainability means to you, and then define what resiliency. We've got some really interesting comments. Resiliency was more the term that city and county leaders used in order to be pandemic ready, in order to be develop the right workforce, to have the right predictive analytics to make sure their buildings were tight. That's the words they use more than sustainable. Sustainable was seen more carbon emissions and more green, which is very, very attractive for some, but in certain areas, they're really just focused on that economic vibrancy. And then efficiency in uncertain times. As we know, local governments don't always have that war chest in terms of dollars, even though these federal funds are pouring in. I just heard on the Hill the other day that some of them might start getting clawed back. Specifically because all the amount of money that's been pouring out of the White House, and some of it's not been obligated yet. So if it hasn't been obligated, and if you're out there and if you're an elected official, give it some thought, because some of those dollars are really in flux at this point. And then the last piece is there are more devices that are out there than there are human beings on the earth, and so we need to understand that all of those devices, and I'm sure that our friends at Senet will be talking about, once you get it and you're aware of it, and then how do you analyze it and how do you package it, and then potentially sometimes how you profit from it is a large discussion that continues. So I think the next slide is the last one for me, and we talk a little bit about this wonderful concept, and we're really interested in hearing from the audience in terms of what you consider a smart city is. About 10 years ago, actually now about 12 years ago, when my colleague and I started looking at the smart city space, excuse me, we went out and asked definitions, and at one point we had written down on a yellow piece of paper 29 different definitions. And so I said to him, well, what do we do? And he said, well, we're going to throw this out. This is ridiculous because it's so customized for everyone who's talking about that. So we went to the Smart Cities Council, which is kind of the gold standard for North America, and they said it's a municipality that uses that communications technology to increase operational efficiency, make sure that they're sharing information, improving the quality of life, and then focusing on improving people, place, and planet. And so it means something different for everyone, depending on where you are in your smart city journey. And I'm sure that we could talk to folks that are in San Diego and talk to other people who are in Calhoun County, Arkansas, and get a very, very different definitions. But we're here to listen, and we're here to help as well. And thank you.
Oh, actually, Lisa, so, you have a talk about your survey, if you will.
Thanks, Craig. So yeah, so that was another thing, because we're constantly searching for those insights and understanding really what the smart cities is, and then how people are defining it. So we teamed up with Smart Cities Dive, and we spoke to around 300 different city managers, county commissioners, and mayors, and said, you know, we asked them a whole host of questions, and some of the really interesting insights are on these next two slides. So we wanted to understand what they really thought was the priorities. And you can see on the first one, 44% of the city leaders chose that quality of life was truly the driving factor for the city's decision to invest and pursue any type of smart cities goal, which that could be investing in technology, that could be investing in new headcount, having the head. I've seen cities that have the head of smart cities. There are chief heat officers that are out there now. There are chief resiliency officers. And so there's a whole host of folks. And so they really believed that quality of life was going to be one of those pieces that they could actually use to attract or retain their people. And it was really, really important. And that quality of life, I would say standard, certainly changed after the pandemic. People have a lot of choices. And so that was something that they really held tight. And the second piece was, we asked them, and they said 78% of them, city leaders, said they were on either track or they were on the path. And that's basically what we have learned over the last 10 years, is that everybody is in a different place on their path towards being what they consider a smart city. And so as long as they're on that path and on their journey, and they need partners and great ecosystem developers like ourselves and Senet, that you can't do this alone. You really need to go it as a group. I think there's one more slide that highlights some things, Craig. Great, right? And then some, you know, quite frankly, despite the headway, they're really pointing to issues that can derail. And a lot of that has to do with the overall leadership, not knowing what tools that they have or technology that they want to invest in. People constantly say, I want to be future proof. Well, we don't believe in future proof, but we do believe in being future ready. And if you work with the right thought leaders and you work with the right companies, they can actually help you with those tools. And I think that there's a lot of folks that are out there that are kind of frozen because they want to make sure that they're not investing their citizens' hard-earned tax dollars on technologies that might become, obsolete in the next year or two. So there's that balance of making sure that you're on track, but also making sure they're being prudent and it's being economically viable and it's working with your budgets, et cetera. And then, as we said before, embracing those partnerships and alternative financing. You can't swing a cat without reading about all the different federal funds that are pouring out of the White House. And we're seeing a lot of our customers and our other folks in the industry that are looking at alternative financing, such as public-private partnerships, which is extremely common at this point because they're learning how to use other dollars, contingent financing, work through energy performance contracts, and a whole host of others. And we actually internally have a big wheel that we work with our customers and talk about all the different financing. And we even have our own financing. We have our own capital group as well. And so the message here is to learn how to stack those and layer. And I just heard the Department of Education talk about the funds and also other alternative financing options and how public officials should learn how to stack and layer these different funds in order to achieve their goals. And that might be it, Craig.
All right, well, thank you so much, Lisa. You have done a great job of explaining what exactly is a smart city, because I know that's a very, very nebulous topic. And, I laughed when you said that there were 29 known definitions of what is a smart city, because I've seen that and I felt that frustration. So I want to thank you for that. And now I'd like to turn it over to Tom and Mark to talk about the 4 other terms that you really need to understand when you discuss smart cities and IoT devices and applications. So Tom and Mark, would you first start by telling us about Internet of Things?
Sure, this is Mark, and Tom and I are going to kind of take turns on these next few slides. So I'll start here in the next few slides, and then I'll turn it over to Tom. So it's interesting when you think about the IoT, Internet of Things. Some people may have heard that term for a long time. Some people may be hearing it for the first time today. It's really part of a broader umbrella that is called digital transformation. We're making everything smart. So we went from connecting all of our computers to the internet to connecting all of our mobile devices to the internet, and now we're connecting literally everything else. So some people call the Internet of Things the Internet of Everything. There's some older terminologies for it, like machine to machine or M to M. There's a number of different kind of monikers or buzz phrases about this. It really all boils down to we're connecting different types of devices to the cloud, above and beyond what we've traditionally done, which are laptops, tablets, mobile phones, and so forth. So if you go to the next slide, I'll describe in a little more detail. So really, and when you think of IoT, you typically, these days anyway, are thinking about it in terms of wirelessly connected devices, and very oftentimes battery-powered devices. So when you think about wires, a lot of times you have 2 wires in a device. One is to plug it into power, and the other is to plug it into the internet. Well, if you take those 2 wires away, now you have a completely autonomous device that is being powered by a battery or by a capacitor or a solar or some other mechanism, and then it's connected to the cloud through any number of different types of wireless technologies. And we all know and love things like cellular and Wi-Fi. But the one that we're going to talk about a fair amount today is called LoRaWAN. And LoRaWAN, the word LoRa, L-O-R-A, is spelled, it stands for long range, and WAN is wired area network. So LoRaWAN, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But irrespective of the network type, when we think about the IoT, there's really 2 fundamental types of devices. There's sensors and there's actuators. And sensors can be, and you can read the slide, I won't read it, but it can be, there's a sensor for everything these days. If you want to, sense vibration, or you want to log some kind of data, like meters are very common. I know we have some water metering folks on the call today. So any kind of data logging, sensing of any type, and getting that data from the device on what we call the end device or the endpoint up, getting that data up to the cloud. Because at the end of the day, this is about getting data from the endpoints, the tentacles, if you will, up into the cloud, or vice versa. And LoRaWAN is a bi-directional technology. The other flavor is what we call actuators, where the device itself is actually going to do something like turn a valve or flip a switch. And you may have some devices that do a little bit of both. There's actually a third that we don't have listed on here, that third category called trackers. And we do in the world of LoRaWAN, the world of IoT, we do a lot of asset tracking, people tracking, geofencing. There's really a very large number of different types of tracking technologies that are used in the world of IoT, and we do a little bit of all of that. I put a note on the bottom of the slide. When you think about sensors sending data to the cloud, we call that an uplink message. And in the LoRaWAN world, these connections from the end device to the cloud, the data that's flowing is in messages. It's not a streaming data the way you think about when you're streaming Netflix or something like that. This is very low power, and that's what drives the long battery life. So when the message goes from the end device to the cloud, we call that an uplink. And when the message goes from the cloud application and it's sending an instruction down to the device, we call that a downlink. Turn off that valve, for an example. Another example of a downlink is sending instructions to the device to behave in a certain way, or we might be doing something like updating the firmware on the device, doing an upgrade, if you will, of the software that's in the device. So let's go on to the next slide. So I'm borrowing this DNA term from a partner that said it the other day, and I really liked it, so I put this slide together. And I actually added the S on the end, because really it's, you need a systems integrator or a solution provider to tie it all together and to be kind of a one-stop shop, not only for acquiring the solution, but for providing that tier 1 support, and then relying on partners on the backside to provide the tier 2, tier 3 type support. So DNA, it's an easy thing to remember, device network application. And I use some very simple examples. On the device side, you have indoor devices, you have outdoor devices, you have sensors, actuators, trackers. We'll talk in some detail later in this deck about all the different types of use cases, but I picked a really simple indoor use case here, which is a device that I have a couple in my house actually that do simple things like motion detection, temperature, humidity. Tom's holding one up there. I also have an indoor gateway. This gateway here is probably about a $300-400 gateway. It's about 10 inches wide. It looks a little bit like a Wi-Fi router. And again, this is very specifically LoRaWAN, but this really applies to any kind of IoT. It doesn't have to be LoRaWAN, but we're talking about LoRaWAN today. On the network, the N for network pointer here, you've got you need what we call RAN, which is radio access network, which is essentially gateways. And in an indoor application, gateways are pretty easy to mount and get going. It's very, very similar to putting in a Wi-Fi router. In a more what I'll call industrial or utility type application, we generally use outdoor ruggedized gateways and put them up as high up on a vertical asset as we practically can. So we do a lot of work with Tom's former company, American Tower, and companies like that, Crown Castle, SBA, and dozens of others, to enable our partners or customers to get broad umbrellas of coverage for outdoor applications. The little screen you see next to the gateway there is the network management platform, and that is essentially the business that Senet is in. So you use that platform to provision the gateways, to provision the IoT devices, so that you can manage and monitor the network and the end devices. A good analogy is if you took an unlocked iPhone, let's say, into Verizon store, the first thing they do is and you want to use it on their network, they need to provision that device on that network. First thing they do is they log into a computer platform and a software platform, and that is a network management platform. So that is essentially Senet's business, and we have a very robust carrier scale software platform to enable this management of the network. And then, of course, the A of DNA is application, which is, what are we doing with this data, or what are we going to instruct on the downlink? What are we going to instruct the device to do? If we need to flip a switch or turn a valve or what have you. And so the application piece is arguably the most important piece, although every single piece of the puzzle is critical. So it's a good way to remember IoT. It requires not just DNA but DNAs, because the S is the entity that's going to tie it all together and work with these different entities on the gateway side, on the device side, on the application side, and of course on the network connectivity platform side to get it all working smoothly. Tom's going to take over the next slide, so fire away, Tom.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit too, but first I wanted to talk about the different types of communications. I call it the three-legged stool, the three-legged IoT stool. So understanding the different requirements of your connected device, on that first section, everybody's pretty familiar with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, very high capacity, high bandwidth, your phone. Mark always gives the analogy that when Wi-Fi was first starting, the first use case for it was untethering my laptop. I can work on the porch. Now I log into my router and I've got 30 things connected to it. Sometimes I don't even know what they are. So there's certain characteristics of each one of these legs of the IoT stool, and high bandwidth, that data rate bar that kind of runs across all three of these legs, high data rates, but the range is very short. The higher you get in frequencies, higher the capacity in the radio frequencies, but the shorter the distance it'll travel, and also through buildings and walls and things like that. Battery life will vary, again, depending on the usage, but the cost is generally somewhat expensive, relatively speaking, to what we're talking about with LP-WAN. That middle column is cellular. The first column is designed usually for stuff that's not moving. It's fixed. It's, you're in a room, you're connected to a Wi-Fi access point. Cellular, again, higher bandwidth, longer range, more mobility involved, like tracking, GPS tracking, things like that. Battery life, again, depending on what you're using for, like pinpoint GPS and things, the battery life will come down, certainly, and it can get very expensive. Cellular, using somebody else's network, you have to pay for it. That brings us over to the third kind of leg of this IoT stool, and that is the low power wide area network, LP-WAN, which just describes kind of an overarching wide area protocol. And in that protocol, you have other variations. You have LoRaWAN, which is a standard. You have Cat M1, which is a cellular base, NB-IoT, which is a cellular base, and Sigfox, which is still being rebranded. But the beauty of low power wide area networks is the data rates, tiny little packets of data transmitting long ranges, which allow, the fundamental kind of core value of LP-WAN is total cost of ownership. And underneath that total cost of ownership, you have the ability to deploy once in 10 years. Battery life, like a coin battery, can last up to 10 years depending on the application. And then consequently, the price comes way down. So that's kind of the three-legged stool of the IoT world and the different types of technologies.
All right, I'll do this next slide, and then I'll turn it back over to Tom. So basically, and I talked about this a little bit already, and you can see the LoRaWAN logo up here on the upper right. LoRaWAN is very similar to Wi-Fi in some ways, and the exact opposite in other ways. So I have a Wi-Fi router and a LoRaWAN gateway which you could kind of interchange those two terms, router and gateway, but we use the word gateway for some reason in the LoRaWAN world. Right here, sitting on my desk, right next to each other, they look similar. They both run in unlicensed spectrum. So, you know, when you think about cellular and the billions of dollars cellular carriers spend on licensed spectrum, you know, that factors into total cost of ownership. Wi-Fi is, you know, I use it to do everything I do on online, whether it's my television, my my computer, and so forth. So very, very high bandwidth and short range, whereas LoRaWAN is very low bandwidth. And then again, it's messages. It's not a streaming protocol. It's packets of data that are transmitted infrequently. And I'll use an example since we have water metering folks on the line. In a water metering implementation, of which we've done many, you know, very, very high scaled commercial deployments of what's called AMI, automated metering infrastructure. The battery in the water meter is typically two D-size batteries, and we know from science that they're going to easily last for 20 years. And the communication profile is generally, you know, every few hours, let's say, the communication module in the water meter will wake up. It'll send a very tiny message that is a compressed gathering of multiple readings over those few hours. And it might even be that it's even more than those last few hours. It's probably batching in, because this is a small amount of data. It's probably batching in the last, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours of readings. And every few hours, waking up, transmitting that packet, and any LoRaWAN gateway within range is going to receive that packet and then transmit it, typically over cellular, to the cloud, to the Senet network management platform, and from there we send it northbound, as we call it, to the application in the cloud. So it's a pretty interesting model. The reason that I listed that they both coexist with cellular is because we, you know, when you think about your day-to-day world in your home and around your home and business, you're probably using cellular and Wi-Fi every day, and they coexist very nicely. In the LoRaWAN world, it's similar. We don't ever say LoRaWAN is going to replace cellular or cellular is going to replace LoRaWAN. You know, there's competitive overlap, but they're really more complementary to one another than competitive. And the best example of that is that when you think about a LoRaWAN gateway, what is, especially if you're putting it up on a vertical asset, you know, 100 feet up in the air, how are you going to get the data from that gateway? The LoRaWAN data that's coming from all the tentacles, all the different end devices. How are you going to get that data to the cloud? Well, it's almost always cellular. So we think of it as, instead of putting a cellular SIM in potentially hundreds of thousands of endpoints in your city or in your utility, what have you, put LoRaWAN devices out there, and the aggregation points, which are all of the gateways, are going to have a cellular SIM. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're really extending your cellular connection from the gateway by using LoRaWAN wireless protocol to the endpoints, the end devices. Let's see. I think that pretty much covers this slide. And of course, you know, when you think about one final point, and I'll turn it back over to Tom. When you think about your use of Wi-Fi in your home, as an example, pretty much all of those devices are either recharged frequently, like every day, like my phone, I can recharge every night, or you've got it powered, like my thermostat, my doorbell, you know, smart plugs, those types of things. Those are drawing power, so they're not battery powered. LoRaWAN devices are typically, if they're stationary sensors or actuators, like meters and the different types of things we're going to talk about, you know, they're going to be battery powered. The moving LoRaWAN devices like trackers are also battery powered, those are going to probably be recharged, occasionally, but certainly not every day. It's going to be more like every month, every year, that kind of thing. Depends on the communication profile, of course. I'll turn it over to Tom for the next few slides.
Yeah, I think, we've already touched on this, low power wide area networks, LPWAN. When I kind of talked about the three-legged stool, but in the low power wide area network, you have LoRa, which stands for, and I think all these slides are going to go one after another, but LoRa, which stands for long range. Think of LoRa, and I'll keep this kind of really simple. Think of LoRa as a communications protocol, which is like cellular. And then so how does someone, if you're going to develop something, an app to run to use somebody's cellular device, how do you know what to design for? And that's where LoRaWAN comes into play. It's a standard that is set so people worldwide can develop sensors and gateways and things and applications and have a standard to design to. So it's more like, LoRa is like cellular and LTE is like LPWAN or LoRaWAN. And in our world, it's LoRa and LPWAN is the standard to design to. So yeah, I think we can flip through these pretty quick, Craig. Yeah, LoRa. I mean, it's we can read the fancy slides, but I think keeping it as simple as possible is probably better. Go ahead to the next slide. You can keep going. I think just going back to you, Mark.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So this is a diagram that shows the bidirectionality of the LoRaWAN packets. So put a few utility flavored LoRaWAN things or IoT end devices there on the left. In the middle, we've got the gateways. So this is kind of the flow of the data for an uplink is device to gateway to cloud. And within the cloud, you have the Senet LoRaWAN network management platform that will do things like deduplicate the data, because the data might be picked up by multiple gateways. And this is another distinction between a protocol like Wi-Fi and LoRaWAN, is that there's no direct relationship between a device and a gateway. Whereas, when I go to my friend's house, I have to ask them, well, what's your Wi-Fi name, and then what's the password, and I associate my phone or my tablet or what have you to their Wi-Fi router. That doesn't happen in the LoRaWAN world. If you can take and I encourage everybody to do this, actually, go get a LoRaWAN device, get our free developer login. You can go on our website and sign up for one, and provision that device on your own instance of the Senet network management platform, and take it around. We have partners who have deployed gateways on vertical assets, on little pole, fence poles like you see here, tower, communications towers like you see here. But they're on billboards, they're on church steeples, they're kind of all over the place, and it's growing every day. And of course, people have them indoors as well. And if they've made them multi-tenant, then when you sign up for our network management platform, we have the free version. You become a tenant, and you can access gateways that are literally everywhere and counting, so to speak. In most instances, you're going to have to either bring your own gateways to accommodate your specific use case in the specific area that you're deploying, or get a partner, whether it's Senet or one of our partners, to do that for you. There's lots of ways to skin that cat, but it's interesting to see how much this radio access network is actually expanding. But so back to the flow, the device transmits. It says every few hours or however it's provisioned. Here's my data. Any gateway within range picks up that data and immediately sends it over cellular to. It doesn't have to be cellular, but it's almost always cellular. I've listed some of the other what we call backhaul technologies. It can be satellite if you're in the middle of a non-populated area, that kind of thing. But the idea is it gets from the gateway. The LoRaWAN package gets to the gateway. The gateway basically then sends it over the backhaul, cellular typically, to the Senet network management platform in the cloud. And in the cloud, the Senet platform knows what to do. If it gets 10 different copies of that, because that device was within range of 10 different LoRaWAN gateways, it'll deduplicate and it'll send the one with the best signal strength. It'll send that to the application. So that can be on Azure, it could be on AWS, it can be on your own cloud, whatever the case may be. Our job is to get the data reliably from the device to your application in the cloud, or from your application, again, bi-directional, back down to one of the gateways and down to the end device where it's targeted. So if I need to shut the natural gas off in 123 Main Street, and the application has the smarts built into it to enable that, then we take that data and we make sure that happens. What else on this? I think that pretty much covers this slide. We can go to the next slide. So, yeah, that one. So again, I think we've covered most of this. This is interesting because you see a depiction of, LoRaWAN gateways on rooftops, on telecommunications towers or fence poles, and even indoor gateways, and we show the cellular tower here that we all see, as we drive down in the highways, and we see these all over the place. And so, again, these technologies are very complementary to one another, and we view the cellular as an important mechanism to get those aggregation points for all the LoRaWAN data that's coming in, the LoRaWAN gateway, to get that data up to the cloud and vice versa. So that's, I think that wraps it up on that section. Now we can turn it back over to Tom to talk about some of the different use cases.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I want to kind of piggyback on the broadcast technology sort of versus cellular, what we're used to. So LoRaWAN is a broadcast technology, and we talk about the long distance it can travel. Of course, the higher you go, the further it'll travel, and obviously geography can play a role in that. But to give you an example, I also have the multi-tech router in my house. I have about 10 of my own, devices, and in my gateway, I'm in Florida. I'm in Tampa, Florida, so it's flat. I'm in a pretty tight neighborhood, but it is the water meters are all LoRaWAN enabled water meters here. And my gateway on my first floor picks up about 90 devices, which about 10 are mine. So it's picking up, even on the first floor, it's picking up, the 3 or 4 streets right around me, all of their water meters. So again, as Mark said, Senet's platform, which is our core network, just like in the cellular world, when you make a phone call or you initiate a data session, the first stop of that traffic is going to, like Mark said, with provisioning your device on Verizon, you go to their core network and you get authenticated. And you go, okay, is this who you say it is? Do you have, did you pay your bill? Are you allowed to be here? And then we're going to route your traffic. Is it on our network? Is it somebody else's network? And that's the core business, tongue-in-cheek, core business of Senet, is that LoRaWAN network server provider, which is, in our swim lane, this is basically all we do. The radio access piece, yes, we do. We have a lot of partners that do that, but our core function is a carrier grade network with a 4.9 SLA, which is really important to some folks more and more as we start deploying solutions that application provider wants to provide their customer an actual SLA. We have competitive products that may go down for an hour here, 2 hours there, which is can be detrimental in kind of life safety situations. So just kind of something to think about. So
yeah, let me add some of that too, and I think it's really interesting. Tom's gateway is not designed in, if you will, by our customer in Tampa that he's describing on the water metering side. So it's a nice to have. So if his granddaughter, who has the toy that's behind him on the bed there, inadvertently unplugged the gateway and plugged in her toy or whatever, there would be no issue with that. Having Tom's gateway up and running in Tampa is a nice to have, because the more gateways, one of the nice things about LoRaWAN is that it's kind of, I think of it in non-technical terms, it's kind of a self-healing network. It'll use, if there's more gateways to use, it'll use them, and it'll improve the efficiency of the overall network and actually of the battery life on nearby devices, because the network can actually, and part of what the Senet network management platform does is it will send downlinks that are kind of separate from what we would think of as a normal downlink to nearby devices to say, hey, you don't need to shout, just whisper, I'm right here, I can handle it. And and so the device can be instructed to use, and I won't get too technical here, and I'm not very technical, by the way, but it'll use different spreading factors and different data rates, and even different what they call transmit power in LoRaWAN speak, to optimize the battery life in a nearby device. So I just think it's a really interesting element of the way LoRaWAN works, is that, you know, we don't know who the next entity or person that's going to plug in a nearby LoRaWAN gateway, but if they do it and they make it multi-tenant, which is a choice, we'll use it for anybody's use case.
So I know we're running kind of low. We got 10 minutes left, so I do want to go through kind of some of the. If you want to go ahead, Craig, to the next slide. Talk about some of the things that are available. Unless Craig, you had something else to add there or a question?
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
So, you know, really the reality is, you know, once the LoRaWAN Alliance, which Senet's a founding member and our CTO sits on the board there as well, which is very helpful for us. And for those of you who don't know, we're headquartered in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. All of our support is US based. So it's nice having it here. But the sky is kind of the limit on what's being developed out there. You've had devices that are, you know, your simple motion sensor, temperature sensor, to much more sophisticated that are putting all that into one. You know, obviously we talked about water. That's a big deal. Water meters was a big use case for us. And what we're starting to see now, especially in building, especially commercial and multi-dwelling unit MDU space, is leak detection. So leak detection means a couple different things to people. Leak detection, for example, your toilet's running, I'm wasting water, and there is a specific kind of return on investment to stop that from happening and sending out a superintendent to go fix that toilet. That's, you know, a specific kind of leak detection, and there's an ROI for that. And then more importantly, what we're really starting to see a hockey stick is traditional actual leak detection, water intrusion detection. So plenty of sensors to sit behind the toilet to say the toilet is not just running, it's actually leaking onto the floor, and I'm going to have an insurance issue. The tenant's out. You know, I'm not going to. How would I ever know it leaked until there's, you know, a lot of damage? And the number, and actually in the MDU space, the number one expense is water damage. So that's really peaking for us, especially from a density standpoint, because if you think about a typical apartment complex, it's 2 bedrooms, you know, or 2 bathrooms. You've got one, you know, sinks under each sink behind a toilet, things like that. Other things in smart cities, you know, we can keep going. Stormwater monitoring, easy. I mean, I watched an RFP go past me months ago, which was designed for a specific protocol, and I was just kind of banging my head saying I could go out there literally in 15 minutes and apply a sensor, because we have a Senet network in Tampa. I could literally, you know, attach a sensor to a bridge and be measuring the water level of that river going underneath it in 10 minutes. With the floodwater levels as well. You want to go to the next slide, please? So other things that are starting to happen, and I don't want to go too long here, but smart lighting, smart parking, things like that. Smart lighting means, again, a couple of different things to people. Smart lighting from a utility smart city standpoint, where you already have hardwired lights, even if you switch them to LED, you still have the ability to control them. It's a simple plug and play feature where you can now control, like, I know I need these to come on earlier. These are in a parking garage. I want them to stay on longer, and you can start having your lights smarter. What we're seeing in Tampa, in Florida in general, is a lot of battery powered in neighborhoods. These lights aren't connected to any utility. There's a pole stuck in the ground with a battery, the solar panel up on top. So another use case is monitoring the condition of the actual LEDs and then the actual battery. So smart waste management, we're seeing that. Outdoor air quality, that's a big one. I noticed you had rodent traps. Yeah, there are LoRaWAN rat traps out there.
that one was for me, Tom. Sorry, I had to throw that one in
Go
there.
ahead to the next slide.
I just think it's hilarious.
Amazing.
Yeah, the next one actually, if it started with you, I'm gonna pitch it to Philip real quick because he, I know he's got
Sure, you want to wrap up? Yeah.
great things to say about building. So.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Tom. As both of you know, the built environment is another area where LoRaWAN could provide tremendous benefit. To some examples, sensors can monitor the room temperature, the humidity, the carbon dioxide levels to make sure that the built environment is both safe and comfortable for the occupants of either a public or a private facility. Outside air temperature sensors can also be mounted at various locations around a building. The data from those sensors can then be input into the building automation system to maintain the temperature set points across each zone. Room occupancy sensors can create real-time data on both the occupancy and utilization of different spaces and areas in offices, hybrid workspaces, hot desks, hotel rooms for room allocation, cleaning, or usage analysis. And lastly, the LoRaWAN sensors can monitor soap and paper towel supply in restrooms, indicate when a garbage bin is full, or count the number of times a door opens to infer usage. That information can trigger an alert to cleaning crews who can meet cleaning needs as they occur. So Jonathan, would you provide us some additional use cases from actual smart city deployments?
Sure, Philip, happy to do it. It's not possible to have metering of electric, natural gas, and water utilities, as well as utility submetering of buildings, such as in a campus environment. LoRaWAN sensors can accurately monitor propane tank volumes, and they can also be used to monitor the condition of both utility and communication poles across the city. The sensors have accelerometers in all three planes, and a sensor will wirelessly generate an alarm whenever a pole becomes tilted or falls. Kind of neat. Electric lines, you can even have sag sensors to inform a utility of ice buildup on the lines, and if that's about to create an outage. LoRaWAN sensors can provide real-time indoor asset tracking that is accurate, easy to deploy, simple to use, and has a low cost to maintain. And lastly, LoRaWAN can be used for real-time fleet management that's also responsive to local traffic conditions, just in addition to everything else we talked about, right? So just tremendous capabilities here, and really seeing everything kind of coming together is really just tremendous to see. So with that, I know we're only have a few minutes left here. I did want to open up for any Q&A from the audience. Craig, I'm going to ask you to quarterback. Tell me if there's anything in the queue. I don't see anything, but I know we've had glitches before where sometimes I'm not seeing things and you are. So, or if there's any.
One thing I'll say, if it's okay, real quick on that,
Sure.
on that last graphic, is that I love that graphic because it shows both indoor and outdoor end devices, sensors, actuators, trackers, and so forth. Tracking can be outdoor as well, by the way. If you're interested in that, let me know, and we can have a sidebar conversation on it. But this graphic is maybe missing one thing, which is more gateways. It shows a gateway at a high point on a telecommunications tower, but there's probably gateways indoors as well. There may be some other outdoor gateways. It is long range, but depending on the device and the characteristics of the device, you may need more coverage. And so that's just something to keep in mind as if you're thinking about a LoRaWAN deployment. These are things that we can help you with.
Yeah, Jonathan, we did have one question, and that was if the presentation is going to be available, and I will say definitely yes. You should receive a link probably tomorrow from GoToWebinar with a link to download this presentation, and then we will also post it on the Johnson Controls YouTube channel under the Water Solutions playlist. It should be posted within 2 or 3 days, and then you can also download the slide deck from the handout section of your console. And if you have any more questions, just please send us an email at bluewater@jci.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And we'll also get Tom and Mark involved as well.
Hey, and Craig, I have one last point. So
Yes, Lisa.
because Johnson Controls has been in the smart city space and a leader globally for many decades, and we were one of the founding partners for the Smart Cities Council, which we still are incredibly involved. The one thing that we are constantly aware of, that leaders, municipal leaders, at all levels of the government, so state, federal, and municipal leaders want to make data-driven decisions. And so the more technology that you invest in, the more that you can actually have information and package and understand the vitality of your data. That's the way to go. So I want to thank our folks from Senet. I want to thank this water team and Philip for putting this all together. And anytime we can learn from each other is time well spent. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And Audrey, would you please take us out today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Craig. Please join us for the next Johnson Controls Blue Water webinar on Wednesday, June 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern Time or 8 a.m. Pacific Time. Dr. Robert Leisher will be joining us to share his research into what causes distribution system pipes to have leaks, breaks, split mains, and blowouts. You will be amazed at the information that he has to share with you. Most importantly, he'll demonstrate that these failure modes can be prevented. After his presentation, our good friends from SL Circo will join us to demonstrate their Tenon software to us. This software combines data from nearly infinite sources into one platform and makes creating queries and data analysis possible for a multitude of different departments within a city. You can register for this free webinar by using the link that you see on the slide, capturing the QR code on the slide with your smartphone, or send us an email at bluewater@jci.com and we'll email the registration link right to you. Thanks for attending the Johnson Controls Blue Water webinar today. We look forward to seeing you again on June 21st for our next event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.